Good morning, good morning. I'm Victor Mills, Chief Executive of the Chamber. A very warm welcome to SICC. It is great to have a members event in the members room. So for your comfort and safety, while you're drinking, you can, of course, take your mask off for obvious practical reasons. But when you're not drinking, please wear, or speaking, please wear your mask. In case of any emergency, very unlikely, but in case, the exit is immediately to your right as you go through the single glass door you came in. So there's a staircase and 10 floors to run down. Unlikely. More likely, the washrooms are outside this office, across the lift lobby, to the right for gents and to the left for ladies. I'm delighted that we're all here today because we're here because of my ignorance. And I'm a great believer in continual learning. I know this much about crypto, zero. But of course, I read the media. And we've come up with one of our more controversial titles, which is Crypto is Worthless. And it's very much a proposition. You don't have to agree with it. You can disagree with it. We're here to debate it. We're here to learn. We're here to share collective experience, and there is a lot of experience around this table. And we're able to have this debate because we've got some great speakers. First of all, we have Tim, who's a digital champion of many years standing and works for a sovereign wealth fund. Then we've got Rena on my right, who is a IT veteran, and what she doesn't know about IT is not worth knowing. She is with Microsoft. And then we've got Malcolm, who's in the business. His holding company, Technicorum, that's a great name, has within its portfolio crypto businesses. And so we've got a collection of experience. We've got some skeptics in the room. I'm one of those. And, you know, those of you who know me know that I'm an amateur historian. So, of course, if you read the event blurb, you'll see that all this speculative bubble that has popped this year on crypto is very similar to the tulip mania that hit what is now the Netherlands in the 17th century. And people lost their shirts, never mind their fortunes, competing to buy tulip bulbs. Now, you can argue that that all ended up very well because the Netherlands has got a world-famous tulip growing industry. Thank you very much. So how is it going to turn out for crypto? And really what we want to get out of today's session is what are its uses and where is it going and what does it all mean for those of us in business? So we were going to start in a few minutes. Tim is going to give us a presentation. He has very kindly made it idiot-proof for my benefit. So thank you, Tim. And then after he completes his short presentation, the four of us, Rena, Malcolm, Tim, and me, will have a bit of a conversation. Feel free to chip in. If you don't, I will put you on the spot. And ask questions, provide your expertise, provide your perspective, so we can all learn and we can benefit. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Tim. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Victor. So it's my pleasure to be here. And before I go to the actual content of my sharing today, I just want to put a disclaimer here. So what I said here is purely in my personal capacities, doesn't represent the view of my firm. And most importantly, do not take any of my sharings as an investment or financial advice. Without further ado, let's just go to here. So I'll start with a little bit around, so how does a blockchain really work, right? So I would just use a hypothetical example here. Let's imagine a simple use case, which is to add today's events to SICC's archival events. So if we were to do that over a blockchain, so you can imagine someone will key in the details of the events and then hit the button submit. If the solution is based on blockchain, then instead of the information goes to be stored on the server, either on-prem or on cloud, the information actually goes to a network of peer-to-peer computers that's around the world in the same blockchain. And then this network of computers would then use cryptographies to confirm the validity of that transaction. And once they confirm this is legit, they will then cluster that piece of information into a so-called data block. And these data blocks eventually will be chained together to create a history of all the transactions that has consistent timestamp before this. And so you can see the entire thing is pretty much a collective efforts of the network, right? And if somebody ever wants to change that record, then that person needs to get consent of the majority of those computers on the network for this to come through. So that's why people tend to call on the blockchains, they have this feature of immutable stability, right? And if a hacker ever wants to hack this record, then this person needs to take control of a high number of computers in the networks, typically more than 50%. As you can imagine, as the network grows, it becomes eventually almost mission impossible. Okay, so then I'm gonna talk a little bit around Bitcoin, which is probably the most well-known use case of blockchain so far. So for a small number of investors, they're actually now using Bitcoin as additional store of value. And the reason for that is, first of all, it's limited in supply. And it's hard-coded in its algorithm that in total, 21 million of Bitcoin will be minted. At the point of speaking, around 19 million is already in circulation. So the rest 2 million will follow the schedules gradually, that's hard-coded, and eventually into the 2040s. So this is limited in supply. And then its cost to maintain is also relatively low because it hardly requires any storage cost or management cost compared with some of the other commodities we may be familiar with. Actually, for most individuals, all you pretty much need, or in my own case, is just a cold wallet, which costs probably $100, and that will last you for quite some period of time. And at the same time, this is, I would call it, really decentralized governance. At the moment, according to the latest stats, there are more than 30 million holders globally with more than $1 in their wallet in terms of Bitcoin. So this, I would, in the grand scheme of things, I would still call it a small number of investors. Obviously, you can see the small number has reached to a certain kind of scale. And then for this group of investors, the second reason they put money into Bitcoins because this is emerging as a quasi-medium exchange. The very first transaction that's done using Bitcoin as a quasi-medium exchange happened 12 years ago in May. So one engineer in Florida was hungry and he wanted to buy 2 pizzas. So he did this experiment and said, I have 10,000 Bitcoins and I wanted to buy 2 pizzas. In the end, a very brave pizza house took the order and then get delivered to him. On hindsight, we now know those 2 pizzas are probably the most expensive pizzas in the human history to this date. And in today's Bitcoin's price, this 10,000 Bitcoins for this 2 pizza is worth around $200 million US. So 100 million each, very expensive pizza. And fast forward along the journeys, now we are seeing the increasing number of firms are exploring or piloting with Bitcoin as acceptance of payment. So these firms, including Gucci, Rakuten, PayPal, Starbucks, AT&T. Still early days, experimentation in nature, but it is showing that these firms are taking really some efforts there, right? So having said that, we should still recognize that Bitcoin is still a risky asset. And it's risky because first, its price is highly volatile. If we recall in March 2020, when the pandemic first hit, the price once dropped to below 4,000, which is a 50% drop from the prior month average. And from there, because of the additional liquidity in the market, it grows to eventually 68,000 USD in November 2021, just 18 months, right? And now, after that correction has happened, now it's hovering in the band of 18 to 20,000 USD. So it's a bit of a roller coaster ride, I would say. At the same time, its ESG impact has actually raised a lot of concern, right? Because it consumes quite a lot of energies. I think some industry players are trying to address that using renewable energies, but still, it's still this area that we're watching. And equally important, the regulation space has been evolving quite fast. China has pretty much banned it. US is still actually working on their own regulatory framework. We know there could be certain directions they're heading, but it's far from clear. And in Europe, they're putting together the MiCA framework. It gives the good directions, but the details of it is still being finalized. So after covering the Bitcoin, I also want to address some of the myths versus truths on blockchain, right? Okay, the first one, all blockchains are the same. Any of you will agree to this statement before I tell you this is a myth? Some of you might be silently, but the truth is, actually, each blockchain has very different features in terms of security, consensus, or incentives. And the parallel I want to draw here is anyone plays board game or video games at this table or used to play?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So when we play a new board game or new video game, right? A new board game, the first thing we do is probably read the rule book, because I figure out how the game is being played and how do you actually win? How do you actually score points, for example? If you play a new video game, then you'll probably go through a tutorial to understand how the game is played. I would say in certain aspects, the blockchain equivalent is a so-called white paper. So if you ever encounter a new project on blockchains, Google project name white paper. Usually it should come out within one click. And after a few attempts, you still can't find it. Perhaps this project is not worth your time. Okay, and the second myth is cryptos are the only use case of blockchain. We know this is definitely not true. It is the first use case, but there are other use cases, includes the trustless authentication, asset tokenizations, which I will cover in a bit more details in the following slides. So what do we mean by trustless authentication? This actually means you can authenticate something without a trusted centralized party, right? As explained earlier, how blockchain works is really leverage the network, the collectiveness of the network to authenticate something. And there are a few use cases I thought would be quite relevant for international trade, starting with trade trust. This is actually about authenticate digital title document and a transfer of it on the blockchain network. This initiative started in Singapore, but it's increasingly being adopted overseas. And Singapore even amended its Electronic Transaction Act last year to formally recognize so that a bill of lading issued using trade trust is has the same legal status as a paper equivalent. And the next use case, I think Victor and some of the members here will be very familiar with, is the SICC's Electronic Certificate of Origin. If I remember correctly, this was perhaps among the first blockchain-based certificate of origins that's ever issued in the world.
Correct. Industry first.
Yeah, again, the key thing here is using blockchain to authenticate that this certificate is indeed issued by SICC, so people can place trust behind it. And the last use case I want to mention here briefly is Contour. So this is digitalize the letter of credit using blockchain, because traditionally one of the key pain point in the process is people don't really know the status of that letter of credits, whether it has been issued or reason why it is not been issued, for example. But with the blockchain, actually, this can be all solved, and the transfer of the LCs can be done in a short split of seconds. Now, the second category of non-crypto use cases here is what we call it asset tokenizations. And when we say the asset tokenizations, if I use MAS definition, right, it is really about using a token to represent an asset so that you can easily transfer the token and potentially use the token as a collateral for other type of financial services. So just recently, this is a pilot that's conducted by JP Morgan and BlackRock. What has happened, they tokenize the money market fund, and then they can use that tokens as a collaterals. So the benefit of that is you can, instead of being constrained by the normal business hours, you can now actually do it outside the business hours, truly leveraging the benefits of a blockchain. And perhaps for that benefit and for that purpose, seeing the potential, MAS just announced end of May, Project Guardian. Essentially, it is about exploring tokenizations as one of its 4 objectives to further advance the whole DeFi landscape in a regulated and safe manner. So in short, I would say in terms of blockchain, this is a new way of recording informations without the need of a server. Bitcoin is being adopted by a small number of investors as an additional store of value and a quasi-medium exchange, although it's still a very volatile asset. Not every blockchain are the same, and certainly crypto is not the only use case of blockchains. Has a lot of potentials in areas like trustless authentication and asset tokenizations, and the years pass by, perhaps there are a lot more other use cases beyond crypto. So that is pretty much what I plan to share with all today, if you find it useful.
Thank you. And thank you for that shout out about our ECO. And of course, the reason we did that was that previous systems did not have the ability to prevent an original document being tampered with. And of course, that's the advantage of blockchain, in that it's there. Once it's issued, you can't tamper with it, unless, of course, as you say, somebody decides to spend more money than good sense would indicate to hack into it. But thank you very much, Tim. So let's sort of kick off this conversation with just addressing that elephant in the room, that title of our event this morning, crypto. And of course, this was a statement made by the one and only Christine Lagarde, who is the managing director of the European Central Bank. And she made that comment in the context of it's all speculative cryptocurrency, and there's no underlying asset. And I was reading an article yesterday in the Financial Times by Martin Wolf, who is one of their longest serving journalists and something of a financial guru, at least to his fans. And he again was sort of emphasizing the speculative nature of this rather worthless activity. So let's just talk about that. Now, you helped us understand that crypto was the first use of blockchain, but by no means is it the only use. So what do people get out of this speculation, apart from the excitement of making and losing vast amounts of money? Who wants to take that? Malcolm.
Okay, I mean, it's a very big topic.
It's a huge topic, but
sure. So let me start with that. When I first, so earlier you said zero, right? My 0 point knowledge was up to Q3 2017. So I got into the space around that time. Right. Before that, I only heard the word Bitcoin, and I had heard the word ICO. I didn't even hear about or read about Ethereum. So once I discovered it, what got me so fascinated about it was that I saw this as the second coming of the internet. So the internet is basically information transfer, right? A packet of information from one place to another.
Yeah.
Now blockchain enables asset transfer. It's essentially digitization of assets. And now with the world being interconnected, especially with COVID, right, forcing everybody to go online, digital assets, I believe, very firmly will be a fifth asset class. Now we have the four asset classes: you have commodities, cash, real estate, and equities, right? But digital assets, you can see, are increasingly going to be a fifth asset class. And each of these asset classes are at least 100 to $200 trillion. Right? The total worth of all the assets in the world are about a quadrillion, over 1,000 trillion. And with digital assets now increasingly representing real assets or the other asset classes, digital assets will eventually be recognized as a fifth asset class. So the backbone of all this is blockchain, and the use case is cryptocurrency. So I would say that at the very least, it's going to be a more traded form of speculation, right? So people are speculating in real estate,
of course,
in equities and all that, and commodities, in cash. So we'll have a fifth asset class to play with. Right now, the market cap is very, very small, like 800 billion. This is what it was at the peak in January 2018. Now the recent peak was about 2.4, 2.5 trillion. And I think this is only the tip of the iceberg, right? We'll eventually see 100, 200 trillion at least in the cryptocurrency market. And talking about Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin will be at least the same as gold. And gold is about 8 trillion. So long, long way to go, right? Again, don't take this as investment advice. Only buy when the halving comes.
You tell us when to buy.
Yeah. 2024, right? Right. So every time the halving comes, the value of Bitcoin spikes in the next year, right? So in 2012, it went up 10 to 15 times in the year after. In 2016, it went up 10 to 15 times the year after. And in 2021, it was about 6 to 7 times of what it was before the halving. So I think the next one will be 4 to 5 times. But anyway, this is smaller because it has gone up. But anyway, coming back to cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are actually an enabler of ICOs, right? You can call it, IDO, IEO, IGO, IFO. For those who are lost, ICOs. ICOs play on IPO, right? Initial public offerings. So initial coin offerings are ICOs. And then IDOs nowadays are called initial decentralized exchange offerings. You have IFOs, which originally was initial pop offering, and then now it's called initial farm offering. You have IGOs, which are popular, right? For games, initial game offering. And then IEOs, which was popular in 2019, initial exchange offering. So all these are basically releasing tokens to raise funds in order to fund a project, right? So just as IPOs are here to stay, I firmly believe that all these cryptocurrencies to raise funds will still be here to stay. Those of you who are involved in investments, in raising investments, will know that there's an entire spectrum of fundraising. You go to your friends and family round, your pre-seed, your seed, your pre-A, your A, B, C, D, E, and then you go IPO, right? And then you delist and take it back. This is the entire spectrum. Now, where ICOs and all these other initial offerings from coins fits in would be the pre-A to B. That's the series that you're talking about. So it's an alternative investment method. People issue their cryptocurrencies in order to raise funds. but not everyone who issues a cryptocurrency is raising funds.
Correct.
For example, IBM has its own cryptocurrency. So if you're an IBM employee, you can actually ask for your pay in crypto. If you are JP Morgan, you know there's a JPM coin. So its internal customers can also use this coin. One of the very interesting clients that I had from the start, back in 2017, I was speaking at a conference. Then these two people came up to me and asked, can they speak with me? So I asked, okay, exchange name cards. And it was Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. And they said that they wanted to do crypto. So I was wondering, okay, you're not going for retail market and all that. Why? So they said very simply, around the whole world, they have hundreds of entities. And every time they come to the end of the month, it's a nightmare to do settlement. So imagine if they have their own currency and they just issue it in that cryptocurrency, and then they settle individually in every country. So this is an internal method that really works. So to me, I mean, I can talk for the next 3 hours, but but this is a very simple use case, right? And all of you have, I mean, you're probably all working at a large institution. All of you have your own ERP systems, all your intranet systems, and cryptocurrencies are it's a very useful plugin to any of these ERP systems. So at the very least, any company that is using an enterprise resource planning system can also use a cryptocurrency.
Okay, so you've got the speculative side, which is what grabs headlines and commentary, whether it's from Christine Lagarde or Martin Wolf or anybody else. And then you've got the uses where people are issuing a cryptocurrency in order to raise funds for investment, or as an experiment, if you're a multinational, or you mentioned the sort of settlement idea. So I can see how that works. But would you agree that the bulk of it is speculative? Because that's what the market tells a reader.
Yeah, because most of the market is not very informed. Right? Most people I've come across in my journey in the last 5 years only know one part. It's a ball, it's a crystal ball, and they only see one facet, and they say, based on this facet is their dogma, right? They are just going with that. So Christine Lagarde is the same. She only has one part, and she doesn't see the whole.
Yeah,
because she represents IMF, she represents.
So she's looking at sort of concrete assets.
Yeah, but it's also concrete. So right now, like for example, a couple of days ago, I went to see a premium jeweler, right? So they have all these bespoke jewelry pieces and all that. So those of you who want to contact, you can come in. but because every piece they have is unique, so we were just telling them, hey, make an NFT out of everyone, right? Make a 3D NFT. Beside your actual physical piece, you can have the rotating physical, virtual NFT. Wow. And fantastic, right? Those of you who saw the Paris Hilton 3D thing, $200,000. I can show you later. It's on YouTube. But these are real assets. So those who own that NFT can also own the physical asset. It can be a representation, like Tim shared earlier, about the tokenization of assets.
So right? That tokenization is NFT, is it?
No, NFT is only one use case.
One use case. Okay, that I can sort of get my head around.
Yeah, because your certificates are that.
Right. Number one. Number two, artists do this, right? And they then sell the NFTs and for lots of money, arguably more money than the original piece of work or work of art, would go for in US dollars or any other physical regulated currency. So, okay, I get that, because then that moves away from Christine Lagarde's point that it's worthless because there's no underlying asset, because yes, there is an underlying asset, and the NFT is a representation of that asset.
Yep.
And it's a digital representation.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I think extending to what Malcolm is saying, right, about the crystal ball that people looking at one angle. I will talk about a little bit from a technology point of view, like Metaverse, right, perspective, because it's where NFT and then cryptocurrency as a transaction that comes into play, right? So, you have heard a lot of companies, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, many people talking about Metaverse. So then what is Metaverse, right? So Metaverse basically sort of virtual reality, people, this is real world. But then you think about, in the digital world, which a lot of the millennials, especially my teenagers, are as complaining to some of you guys, right? They into gaming. So gaming is one industry where, leading in terms of the metaverse, right? And how does metaverse come into play, right? Talking about some of the scenario that Malcolm talked about, right? The NFT scenario. So where in the metaverse, these digital assets become so real, so, right? And the retailers that are talking about creating that whole virtual retail scenario where you could have these digital assets as part of your living room or as part of your sort of experience, right, in the alternate world. So I think, kind of bringing what Tim is talking about, what Malcolm is talking about, right? How this kind of two comes together. So from a blockchain perspective, there's a technology behind all of that, right? Metaverse is sort of where these things could come into place other than, there's some of the authentication that you talk about, the usage scenario. And from my perspective, Metaverse is something will be coming when we talk about virtual reality hybrid scenario, right? Where people kind of looking at the real world and what that virtual world is going to be. I may not understand that because I'm not in that age group, right? But if I look at where my kids and some of the friends and the millennial is looking into this world, is they live in that world, right? And these digital assets become so real to them. I'll give you one example. My kids will come to me and say that, hey mom, can I have $50 to buy a digital token on the gaming world so that they can, equip themselves with some digital pack, power pack so that they can fight, right? But more and more of this is going to come and then evolve into, real thing, become assets that they can use in the digital world. So I think that's from my perspective, that kind of how this will continue to drive that demand for crypto, right? And you talk about Bitcoin being limited supply, right? And 21 million that are coming up, over the last next few years, right? So from that perspective, the demand is going to increase, right? If you think about where the future is going to go. And then where the supply, there is a certain limitation in supply because of the technology, the mining effort, right, that requires. So then, is it worthless? May not be, right? And when you think about that kind of broader scope, yeah.
Okay, so can you maybe share a little bit about what Microsoft's doing?
Well, so I was
This
sharing
space?
with Tim earlier. So from so you've heard Microsoft talk a lot about Metaverse, right? So recently we acquired a gaming company called Blizzard, right? And Blizzard is a gaming company, right? They do game development. And if you think about where we want to go, right? And the acquisition of the gaming company. And then that will help us to kind of further our kind of agenda into the whole digital world. And a couple of things that we have done, or that is kind of in the, I wouldn't say that is in the roadmap, but you guys read it on the news as well. So one scenario, for example, our what do you call the virtual reality HoloLens, right? So that is something from a business usage perspective, kind of help people to kind of do virtual reality type of thing, right? So that's kind of helping us to move into the kind of hybrid world where you're in the physical world, but you still could go into kind of a virtual reality, kind of do training. So that's one of the scenario, or be part of the kind of setup, right, for virtually. So that's one thing from a Microsoft point of view. And the hardware ecosystem will continue to evolve from the VR perspective, kind of supporting that whole virtual reality scenario. And the second piece, which is many of you probably not know, but more in the consumer side, we have a very vibrant consumer business, especially in gaming, right? Xbox, you guys heard about Xbox?
Yeah.
Right. And then we have a lot of third-party gaming, which a lot of teenagers spending a lot of time during the COVID situation, during the COVID period. So what it does is basically, we're talking about the metaverse and how these kind of two different scenarios come into play. One from a business standpoint, the virtual reality, and the other one from a consumer point of view, right? How we further develop, both hardware and then the gaming platform that will enable some of these interactions and multiplayer gaming scenario, which is a huge gaming industry, right? So and there are also people kind of selling merchandise, let's say, on the gaming world, right? So that is kind of evolving, and then that is to come, right, over the years, and more of this digital reality coming into play. So that's kind of, from Michael's point of view, some of the sort of longer term evolvement of this, digital.
Of the technology and the products that are part of the firm's offerings. Okay.
Let me add to what Rena said. So first of all, I disagree about the age group. I think you're younger than I am.
We're anti-ageist in this chamber. Thank you.
But I was playing a Microsoft game like 20 years ago, right?
Okay.
Age of Empires. So I was one of
Very similar.
yeah, so I was one of the first esports players in the world.
Yeah.
So that's why I disagree about the group. But two points, right? Why Rena is talking about Metaverse in relation to this topic is essentially cryptocurrency are an essential part of any Metaverse, because with cryptocurrency within the gaming environment, then you can cut across all the borders. But essentially, a virtual reality environment is across the border. You are not in a jurisdiction like, oh, you must use a US dollar or a Sing dollar or whatever.
Right.
You use a cryptocurrency. So payments are usually effected through crypto transactions. So coming back to where we were talking about, right? Crypto is an enabler, right? In anything that is digital. So essentially, this is a value proposition, right? So this is what I think will add value. And without a cryptocurrency in a virtual environment, and the whole world is moving into that, right? If you look at any pitch deck now, you add the word Metaverse there, then the value goes 10 times. Really. That's what all VCs are doing right now. Put the pitch deck, add the word Metaverse, and the value has exploded.
Mark Zuckerberg renamed his company Meta for that very reason.
Exactly. And I think it was a very interesting strategic move. And another thing about what you see about NFTs, like I was talking about weapons, armor, power ups, and all that. This has been already happening since games started, right? And back then it was very manual or offline, and there were entire empires that were sprung up to allow the kids to trade, and the kids would be taking the credit cards from the parents and swiping, buying weapons and armor on the secondary market. And now actually NFTs are enabling this by making it a primary market. So it's actually an evolution of what had already existed 25 years ago.
Okay, can you maybe help me understand this whole thing, asset tokenization? You said that NFTs is one example of that. What are the other examples?
It's very simple. I mean, not simple. Okay, there are many ways to slice the cake, right? So if you want, let's say you have a gold bar and you want to tokenize it, you can fractionalize it, or you can make that gold bar every gram equals to 1 token. So you can do it as a utility token, you can do it as a security token, you can do it as an NFT. So these are the 3 main ways. And then of course there are sub methods to do that. So a securitization method is simply a securitized token. So one security token equals 1 gold bar, or 1 security token equals 100 grams or 1 gram, right? So you register this as a security, you go through the usual asset management style. You can only sell it through funds and the accredited sellers, legal brokers. The second method, utility tokens, would then subdivide into 2. You can do it through a decentralized finance method, or you can just issue it as a pure utility token. So let's take the gaming example again. Right? You can make a game goal equals to 1 token, right? And that's actually fungible. So you can't differentiate one against another. But a unique piece of armor or a unique piece of weapon or a power up could be unique. So then that becomes a non-fungible token. So am I losing you guys?
You've completely lost me.
Okay.
What is fungible and non-fungible?
Okay. Fungible is like a grain of sugar against another grain of sugar. You can't tell the difference. Right? One
Okay.
$1 note versus another dollar note. You can't tell the difference,
Okay.
right? So in a game, right, one game diamond against one game diamond, you can't tell the difference. So that's fungible. It's interchangeable and it's the same value, right? A non-fungible means it's unique. So just like your certificate, your identity, right? Your so cryptocurrency actually allows provenance, which is great value, right? You're doing that with your SICC e-certificate. So non-fungible thing, like I said, could be a unique weapon, it could be a unique armor, it could be a unique house. Your title deed can be a non-fungible token, right? A share can also be fungible or non-fungible depending on how you describe it, right? So all these what we talk about in terms of the differentiation between NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and fungible tokens. All right. So earlier I was backtracking, right? You can make your gold bar a utility token.
Yeah.
So that utility token can be exchanged, let's say, for something that then leads to that underlying asset. Or the third method is to just make it an NFT. So this NFT equals to this particular gold bar. You have the certificate number. Right. So there are many ways to do the same thing, but it's a bit confusing because most people don't know all these things.
Yes, I'm one of those people.
Right.
Okay, so multiple uses, getting that. What is the connection between crypto and Web3 and the supposed greater privacy and control over personal data? Where does that, is there an interconnection there?
It's a clear interconnection, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, all of us are in the wrong age group for this. But if you talk
Now
about
remember, we're ageless. We can learn.
you can make your avatar in the Metaverse and it can be any age. Yeah.
Correct.
So basically all the Gen Zs are already getting into the decentralization, Web 3.0, the social environment, anti-government, anti-parents, anti-everything, right?
You're right.
So it's the entire movement of the youth towards decentralization, right? The rebellion against centralization and authority. So most of the youngsters are moving towards whatever has social governance is the best, instead of having a centralized governance method, right? So this is the clear interconnection. There are so many of the young who are investing, and they're not investing in any traditional asset. They're only buying crypto, right? So there are two reasons. One, because they believe in decentralization, and second, because it can get them rich quick, right?
Well, I think the latter is the bigger.
Yeah.
And they don't
motivation.
trust traditional finance at all. Or governments.
Exactly.
Why should they?
That's exactly the whole movement towards Web 3.0, and why give all our data and to all the big giants, right? They're multi-trillion-dollar companies, but you're just giving your data to them.
So this is sort of the anti-Mark Zuckerberg campaign, as it were, right? So regaining control over your data is going to be really important.
Yes.
Okay, that I get.
Yes.
That I
It's
get.
a Web 3.0 movement, yeah. And a great enabler is cryptocurrency. So if like you read about the Freedom Convoy issue, right? With Canada, and you have Ukraine asking for donations, and they just give a wallet, you can just send your crypto there. Now, if you did this in a traditional finance world, the government know exactly who you are very quickly.
Correct.
Right? They'll come after you, right? But this is a big movement for cryptocurrency. It's usually untraceable.
So there's
okay, maybe just to potentially provide adding a bit more color to that, right? So first of all, a lot of people would think that it is anonymous on blockchain. To the contrary, if you're talking about on the blockchain, on Bitcoin network or Ethereum network, actually it's not anonymous. You just need to understand how to read the address. Actually, by deploying some forensic analysis, data analysis, you will be able to trace back who has done what. For example, earlier this year, the US Department of Justice, right, they did the largest seizure ever in their history, which is worth 3.5 billion USD worth of Bitcoin. And they were only able to do that is because they managed to actually trace the blockchain immutable records down to the wallets held by the suspects, right? So I think just to add that is it's not anonymous. It's just requires certain technical know-how to see how to read and trace, right? And another point here is we can see from the recent market movements, right? Still very volatile assets, right? While I think the new generations, they're saying, they have certain beliefs, and they probably also want to actually get the return that was promised to them at the so-called perceived basis of no risk. But reality show there's no such a thing as free lunch, right?
Of course.
Whenever you have a return, you are bearing certain type of risk.
Of course.
Yeah. So then Web3 or crypto is not going to change that. So I just want to add here that I think the risk angle is very important. And that's why the regulation have to catch up. Because without the regulation, it is not very safe for a lot of these individuals to put their savings into this kind of asset class here.
Yeah, which is why Singapore is saying it's not for retail investors. So that's interesting point, Tim, because there's always this balance, right, between data privacy and decentralization and all of that, and the long arm of the law, and the long arm of the tax man or woman, because this has got big ramifications, right, for revenue and for good governance, because the last thing anybody wants is for something like crypto to be used for dark web purposes, which I'm sure it already has been, right? Criminals are very smart people, and they will find whatever is out there and find a way to use it or abuse it, depending on your viewpoint. So, I mean, would you accept that's a big issue right now in this sort of, because regulation is running to try and walk at the moment. So is that a big issue, Malcolm?
Yeah, certainly the regulators are always running way behind the criminals, always. So every new technology, every new thing, all the scammers and hustlers will come first, right? And then the regulators will scramble to understand it and then to
Clean
make
it up.
analogies and all that. And in the crypto space, the regulators are way behind. They can't even understand the first part. Don't talk about all the permutations, because every 3 to 6 months, the entire crypto scene changes, right? It's so fast. The pace of movement in any industry is usually 5 to 10 years. In crypto, it's 3 to 6 months. So you can imagine all the people who can't even use the smartphones or don't even have a wallet trying to figure out all these things and regulate, right? Yeah, it's very hard. But I agree. Like just to add to what Tim said, Bitcoin actually the Fed, the CIA has been looking at it for the last 10 years. So now they are able to trace all these things. So if you're a criminal, it's very dumb to use Bitcoin because you'll definitely be found, right? But there are of course tumblers and tornadoes and various ways to split up all these things. And it's the technical know-how, right? And there are also privacy points. And that's why there are a lot of countries who, understanding this, ban the privacy point. They allow all the other open public coins, but the privacy point is a no-no.
And what is a privacy coin?
Untraceable.
Untraceable.
Yeah.
This is dark web stuff.
Not dark web stuff. It's just the way that the protocol is made.
Like the US dollar.
Sorry?
It's like the US dollar.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Chris.
Yeah, they just keep printing it. And coming back to the point that is raised, so many of the crypto naysayers always say, oh, it's being used for dark web, it's being used for all these things. But if you actually look at the percentage of cryptocurrency that's used for this, it's less than the US dollar. So the US dollar is the number one method of use for all the financial crime, right? And everyone knows that. It's just that they go and hit everybody else because they want to control it. Yeah. So I think that's a small risk, right? And like what Tim shared, if you are doing Ethereum, Bitcoin is very easy to trace actually. Yeah. There's this thing that the Financial Action Task Force actually implemented, travel rule. So those of you in banking and compliance, you understand the money transfer rule is what banks did. And then now the blockchain equivalent is the travel rule. So with that, then they can trace the entire provenance of the transaction as well. Yeah. So I think that's a very small risk. It's, again, one of the weapons that the naysayers will wheel out every few months to say, oh, crypto is bad.
So, Victor,
Yes.
since we're talking about crypto, right?
Yes.
Can the discussion just pivot a little bit to stable coins and the underlying asset of stable coins? Because I think in the last couple of weeks, months, there's been a lot of talk about that. Right? So I'm not sure that's part of the oncoming conversation. If not, maybe just a couple of minutes on that.
It's whatever you want it to be. So thank you. I'm glad you pitched in. Distinguished panel.
Right.
What do you say? What do you say about this?
I'm talking too much. Maybe Tim, you want to share, and then I
Yeah,
can jump
so for stable coins, as you can see, given the recent market situations, actually the major regulators have actually realized that the stable coin regulations has to provide clarities. And I think a kind of the direction of travel we can see these days in terms of regulation in this aspect, right, is they're basically will be requesting the traditional regulated financial institutions as the key issuer of stablecoins in the future. So this is already the law in Japan, right? And then I think there was a bill in the U.S. Congress that's suggesting also something similar. Essentially, is to ensure there's really stability behind these coins. Because as you can see, some in the markets right now, sometimes certain instruments, when they say it's stable, but it's not really asset-backed. And in the traditional finance sense, you will not really call it stable coin.
Right. Yeah. It's a misnomer. It's a misnomer. There's nothing behind it.
It depends. So let me.
I think there was another question potentially, right?
Not so much question, but I'd like to chip in to the multitude of things. Just as for everyone, for the benefit. My name is Stefan Lutz. I'm currently working for a crypto exchange, but my way in crypto was long. It started 2012. I actually came from a bank. I mean, I work for a crypto company now for slightly over a year. So, but I worked previously, I basically grew up in banking with all the classical stuff. I was capital markets lead at PwC in Europe, and I did a lot of international advisory work, central bank financial stability. So that all combines where I come from, and that's why I wanted to react to stablecoins. And as I totally agree with you. The thing is always that this is in every industry about labels and what's in there. It's again about the research. I mean, just that somebody says it's a stable coin doesn't mean that it is, and that's the critical thing about it.
Yeah.
And then stable coins in itself, basically, I mean, and it's not comprehensive. I guess you guys can add to that, but if you look at it, there are basically 2 to 2.5 real stable coin mechanisms. Right. And first of all, you need to understand why you need them. You need them basically to more easily switch between fiat world and the crypto world. You could go directly, for example, buy Bitcoin against US dollars, but this comes at a cost. And actually switching every time is costly in the end and inefficient because you switch between infrastructure. So you have your banking system that works in fiat, and you have your crypto wallets, which work completely separate from that. So it's better to have something which is a representation, for example, of US dollar in the crypto world, which is stably packed to it. So you can calculate for your own bookkeeping in US dollars, which can transact in the crypto world because it works on the same infrastructure as the cryptocurrency. So that's the reason why you have it. And then the question is how it's packed. And then, as you say, there are the asset-backed ones that have, and still don't get me wrong, I don't argue against it, you need them in a way, at least in the current market environment. The risk of those is, do you know what the coverage pool is? It's like with every securitization. You come from classical banking, securitization is always the same issue, it's exactly the same issue. What's the coverage pool? And then the question is, how can you switch between stablecoin and fiat again? Because that would require, just imagine, I give you 100 Tether or USDC, which is the 2, let's say, mostly known ones, I would say. So you give me 100 US dollars, I give you 100 Tether. So and I say for that 100 US dollar, I buy assets that are in stock. So I have a coverage pool. My issue is if you come back to me via your Tether account that's there, and you say, I want to get back $100 because I guarantee you I need to sell those assets. And this is actually the real risk with the asset-backed stablecoin, because I need to be able to sell those assets, treasury bills, corporate bonds, whatever you have, high-quality liquid assets in the market as far as I need to pay it out to you. If that is a mismatch, classical maturity mismatch, then I have an issue. Or if the valuation of those covered pool assets change in relation to the US dollar, then I have a problem too. That's the whole discussion around USDC and USDT. Once you follow it, the thing about the Luna thing, the Terra, so the UST, sorry, abbreviation, the UST, was actually that there was no cover pool. That was backed by a cryptocurrency, so it worked on an algorithmic level, which in the end, I mean, you can say whatever you want about it. As long as it stayed in a specific corridor, it worked very well, actually, because that was the mechanism. But the moment it breaks out of a specific corridor, it doesn't work anymore. It breaks together completely. And this is what happens there. So you have the asset-backed ones, you have the algorithmic ones, which are, I think, of concern for regulators for understandable reasons, actually, because if you use them, you need to know how they work. You might want to use them if you exactly know how they work. People don't do the research. And then you have something that is in between. You have the offering of stable coins that are partially backed, partially more algorithmic in style, or where you don't know what the cover pools are. So, and I expect this will be the focus of further regulatory scrutiny because it touches the fiat world directly.
Let me add to the two gentlemen then. So coming back to, to the first point, for those who don't know what stable coins are, right? Stable coins are usually like we shared, they can be pegged to, let's say, a US dollar, it can be pegged to a euro, it can be pegged to the Sing dollar. For example, in Singapore, it's regulated under Payment Services Act as e-money, right? So if you're an issuer like Express, they issued the Straits coin, XSGD. So that's 1-to-1 for the Singapore dollar. It's not exactly 1-to-1 because sometimes it fluctuates just like demand and supply, which is what the gentleman was talking about as well. But the most common use case is USD. And the first implementation was actually Tether and the Bitfinex guys. So back, I think in 2013, 2014, a group of Dutch and Americans came together and started Tether and Bitfinex. And at that point, they didn't know that it would grow to the huge giant that it is right now. And the problem that we are all talking about for stablecoins arose because of that, because it's a private label company and they were just doing it themselves. And in the crypto world, at that point, no government was paying notice to this. So it has grown so big that it's actually the most traded cryptocurrency right now. The circulation is the biggest. And so the precise problem about, okay, and then let me add to the second point. There are three main methods of stablecoins. One is asset backed, so you can back it. $1 equals to 1 Tether. So that's usually used by like USDC. USDC is the Goldman Sachs Circle and Coinbase triumvirate, right? And they are creeping up very rapidly. So that's the institutional stablecoin, right? And then there's the stablecoin that the rest of the world uses, which is Tether. And Tether is not really fully backed, and that's also a big problem. There was sometimes runs on the bank and it dropped down to 90 cents or a dollar, 2 or 3 times. So the second kind of crypto that is a stable coin is regulated. So if you have a license, let's say from a trust company or from a regulator like US SICC, like Singapore MAS, then you can issue it as a regulated cryptocurrency. So that works just like a trust would work or just like any other banking license works, right? And the third method is through algorithms, and that has a very bad name right now, right? But actually, I'm surprised that so many institutions put so much money into Terra Luna. I think they were all blinded by the glow from Go. But essentially, the first big algo crash was in March 2020, when the value of Bitcoin dropped to like 4,000 briefly, right? That was only for less than an hour. And the reason of that was the flash crash that was triggered by all the bots that were coming in from all the leverage trades. And so the algo that broke for stablecoins that day was MakerDAO. So the MakerDAO DAI system died that day because it was pegged to Ethereum. And when Ethereum went into the death spiral, so it basically liquidated everything. And at that point, the first big algo stablecoin failed. And it's crazy that someone is so, so arrogant that they think they can create another algo coin. And it's even crazier that all the institutions put in so much money into it. So that's what killed the second algo coin. And to me, algo coins don't really work until you really have a foolproof algo. But those of you who are in algorithms and algo trading know that there's never a foolproof. Because once you have an algorithm that's public, you can always make a counter algorithm and then trigger the crash. So there are three main methods for stablecoins, and some of them are regulated. So the regulated ones, I think, would be the biggest challenge to government in the future. Because if, let's say, we're in Singapore, the government needs to do taxes, needs to run monetary and fiscal policy, you need to control the supply of Singapore dollars. Now, if you leave a private label company like Exodus to run it, yes, no doubt they are regulated, but then they decide your monetary policy. So, how crazy is that, right? So I think the biggest challenge to CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, are stablecoins. And one last point for this, because this is huge, is a huge topic as well for stablecoins. Now, the whole value proposition was back in the early days of ICOs. The only way you could buy into another coin was to get in through a gateway coin. And a gateway coin is what we call Bitcoin or Ethereum. So primarily they were Ethereum because almost every new coin came up because there's an ERC20 coin. So you needed to have Ethereum in a wallet first in order to buy all these newly launched ICOs. But stablecoins eventually overtook that to become the gateway coin, because when projects became more and more technologically savvy, they allowed more payment gateways, and of course more payment merchants and gateways came up. So it's now easier to have a tag of value, right? So for all of you who are doing trading, whether you're doing forex or equities or whatever, you always need to have a tag, right? It's a pair. So US dollar versus Sing dollar, or US dollar versus Japanese yen, or Bitcoin against US dollar. So there's always a pair. So it's easiest for most people to visualize the store of value as the US dollar, right? So that's a primary use case that's one of the primary use cases of stablecoin. There are a lot more. I wouldn't overrun the time. But essentially, it's now the best way to get into something and to get out of it. Like now, so many people are just exiting crypto, but they're not exiting stablecoins. They will exit Bitcoin, Ethereum, convert it to US dollar, leave it there in a DeFi pool that can still generate income. And hopefully you don't pick one of those that are going to liquidate, like Celsius, right? So yeah, so this is the usual flow. So now if you want to, a typical trader's mentality would be, let's say, start with the main coin, Bitcoin. So let's say today I want to buy, I put 20,000 US dollars into 20,000 USDT, go to a centralized exchange, get one Bitcoin. Now, if I want to exit that Bitcoin, I would then sell that Bitcoin for either Ethereum, which is the next major coin, or I would convert it back to US dollar, USDT, and then keep it there, right? Now, if I am a typical trader, I will go, 1, 2, 3, 4, rinse, repeat. Meaning Bitcoin, go to Ethereum, go to altcoins, and then the whole bear market go back to USDT, and then rinse, repeat again. So now we are seeing the bear market cycle. The altcoin cycle was over the last 6 months, where altcoins actually went up, compared to like Bitcoin and Ether. So now we are back to either keep as cash or USDT or USDC or whatever, or go into Bitcoin because that's the one that's most likely to rise again. Right. So that's the usual cycle right now. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm bursting to say something.
Go ahead.
I'm saying that. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
Okay. So just for some context, okay, I work for a remote HR technology firm, but that's got nothing to do with why I'm here. So my personal passion has been in crypto since 2013, and I thought it might be interesting for everyone to give an opinion from an early adopter. From, well, not Generation Z lah. At least I can also say I'm older than that. But millennial. Okay. So look, I got into crypto in 2013 and I didn't know anything. Okay, again, retail investors perspective. When I was still in law school, I bought 20 Bitcoins for like $70 each. And my story about that is that it propelled me into this deep black hole of anything and everything to do with blockchain and technology. So that means I've been in the space on and off for 9 years. Sorry, is that right?
Yeah,
9 years.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about the problem statement, right? Is it worthless?
Yeah.
All I've been hearing all day, right, is the hundreds of use cases of not cryptocurrency per se, but blockchain technology. Yeah. Okay, so then I want to just link back because I've been looking at this space for such a long time that I've come to realize that there's, broadly speaking, two camps of people who look at cryptocurrency in a certain way, and unfortunately, it tends to be very binary. They're either naysayers who say that, oh, this is a waste of time, you know, or it's like, oh my God, it's the next thing, it's going to change that whole world if it hasn't already. You all need to get onto this train now and hodl before you lose your chance to make 50K in 1 year ROI 600%. Okay. And the ROI thing is something that's very exciting. I mean, I tried to ride that train unsuccessfully. So back then there was no BitMEX, there was no Binance, so there was Mt. Gox. And those 20 Bitcoins I bought, there wasn't even a crash, it was a correction, but Mt. Gox crashed. And I panic sold because there were no stable coins at the time. And I was worried that I would never be able to cash out of my 20 Bitcoin. So I sold it at a $400 loss, which for a law student was catastrophic.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh my God, 20 Bitcoins at its peak was 1.2 million USD. So that's my story. So what I want to say, right, about this Christine Lagarde, right? The main reason why there's so much, well, obviously it's a moot point that cryptocurrency and by extension blockchain is worthless because there's just so many applications. The real reason why I think there is even a problem statement that people think it is worthless by someone as senior and as well educated and as well regarded as Christine Lagarde is because of the fact that what is the most common application of blockchain? That's the loudest thing that you see in the media. Layman's perspective, of course, the main thing that people are always going to be discussing is, oh, it just went up like, you know, $10,000 overnight, right? That's like far more interesting, far more sexy to say than, oh, it's going to revolutionize the intellectual property regulation of like assets which traditionally have been very difficult to regulate, such as artwork or other sort of assets which can be tokenized. And I think that's the main problem. When we say that something has got worth or value, the traditional mindset is to pull up a financial statement. You look at the PE ratio, you look at the, you know, book to debt, you look at all of the traditional metrics that you will find in financial statements, and then you try and make an educated guess about whether, oh, okay, this thing has got strong fundamentals, let's go long into this thing. But with cryptocurrency and by extension blockchain technology, which is an old technology I might add, it's just that it's got so much good press because of cryptocurrency, right? Chicken and egg thing, right? Which one is first, right? It's a lot harder to evaluate. There is no PE ratio, book to debt ratio, cash flow. There are none of these things that you can immediately ascribe to something like blockchain. Right? And I think that's also the reason why there's so much misinformation and confusion concerning the discussion around blockchain and cryptocurrency. Because the main thing that people see about it is that it's a speculative instrument. But the underlying technology is so revolutionary that I think that it almost transcends the ability for you to quantify it in a traditional fundamental analysis. And it's because of that someone like Christine Lagarde, who comes from old school traditional finance, you know, not everyone is as enlightened as you to make a switch and absorb both of it, you know, on a given keel, right? And I think about how little time she must have, right? If you imagine, right, every day she must be having all these meetings about this new drama, and then there's the Ukraine war now, and then now you're telling me, oh, by the way, we need to get some regulatory oversight into cryptocurrency. Like, can you like come out of a position now? So how much time do we have? So then my speculation on this is that you're going to go to the most populous and most bountiful source of information on cryptocurrency, which is just on its speculative nature. All of these other wonderful technologies that the panel has already been discussing so comprehensively and articulately, I might say, it becomes lost because it's just not as interesting, especially when the main concern for a body like the European Central Bank is stability and ensuring that the average European Union citizen who participates in the financial governance and the institutions in the European Union are not going to lose, you know, $20,000 overnight on one instrument, for example. So that's my opinion on the thing. And then that brings us to the other I think the other sub-issue of the whole idea of whether something has got value or not. Do you measure the value of something based on the fundamentals that you can ascribe to what you can see on a piece of paper or on my statement? Or you base it on how many people are on the same thing at the same time? Usage and adoption as a metric and indicator of worth and value versus we have black and white for you to observe. Traditional finance would dictate, therefore, that cryptocurrency is worthless. But I think with just a sheer pace of technology, which obviously regulatory oversight is unable to catch up with, because they also don't completely understand it. I think the argument is moved already, I would say. Yeah. But
I think from a technology standpoint, I mean, like what you were saying, right? There's so much beauty into the technology. And what Tim was saying earlier, right? The blockchain is enabled because of all the cloud technology that, we have seen that boom over the last few years, right? So with the cloud technology, therefore, the blockchain technology is able to function the way it is, right? If you think about without the, cloud technology, this would not have worked, right? So they've kind of all evolved because of all the adoption of the cloud technology that we've seen, I would say over the last 10 years, actually. Yeah, I mean, both in, you talk about valuation of the technology, it comes in many ways, right? And you also talk about user adoption or scenarios. And some of the examples that I gave is that, when you look at the whole gaming world, right? This example, you look at the cloud ecosystem world, right? Which that's how the blockchains are being enabled through all the cloud technology, right? You look at AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Cloud, right? And blockchain is a subset of what some of the technologies enabled through the cloud, right? So there's lots of beauty into the blockchain outside of the whole financial transaction that you were talking about. So fully agree with you. My opinion is like from a blockchain perspective, there's so much future, right? And of course, then with that technology, then evolve into many different things, right? The usage scenario that we talked about. Yeah, so great insight.
Yeah. That I need to react to that because that resonates so much in my view. To be not frank. I have to say, the more I got into it, I got into 2012, put it aside again because that's a technological solution for a problem nobody had asked for actually originally. And then I went back into it around 2016. So from my point of view, the thing that is the challenge right now is we see all those, you might say, use cases or applications, which mainly what you see, as you say, what you see every day in the news is speculation. You don't see the underlying currents that are there. However, the blockchain technology and what it was designed for is, I have a very, I would say, boring view on that. It actually is a matter of decentralizing governance functions. That's it. So if you look at, which is pretty common, where I come from the European side, are cooperatives. Cooperatives are there for centuries. What a layer one protocol, that's the thing you need to consider about layer one protocol. What a layer one protocol with a well-designed native token is nothing else than a digital representation of a cooperative. That's it. And it enables people to cooperate on governance decisions and allocation of incentives in a way that they don't need to know each other. So in a cooperative, to make it work in a pretty good way, the people need to know each other. They need to get together in a room, have an annual general meeting, blah, 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 and then you have regulations around that. The well-designed native token does exactly this, because the native token, and it's what you said, every layer, I rather say not blockchain, but layer one protocol is different, and you need to look into it. So, but what it has is, I can vote, basically. I can earn incentives with that, right? So, and all of that stuff, which is nothing else than the currency, it's not really, but the unit of account of a cooperative. And it works cross-border. That's, Malcolm, what you said. It's the application cross-border. So every time we have something cross-border and people interacting with each other that don't know each other personally and never will have the chance to get to know each other personally, there we have the application of blockchain technology, which then leads to the Web3 thing. This is pretty, that's it. The rest is where do you branch out? What is it? Is it more in the direction of transfer of value? Is it more in the direction of governance token and voting rights? Because I mean, that was the first instance of blockchain technology to look at, for example, real estate registers as a governing annual general meetings and stuff like that, right? So, and then it went away because it wasn't so funny as speculating Bitcoin. So, and then you have all the building blocks. And then it branches out, then it becomes very complicated, and then you try to find analogies, right? So people started to say Bitcoin is something like digital gold, which in a way it can be, but it might not fully. Which then for me, it's an incomplete analogy. I say, look at crude oil. It's basically the same. What is crude oil? What value would you attach to crude oil? If you really go into it, you can't say. You have a price for it, of course, but you can't say why. I mean, you can say. I know. I mean, people that might be in the commodities industry will have a different view on that, as we in crypto have as well, right? But in fact, it's the same. Why? Because if you think about crude oil, the first thing you think is you put it in your gas tank in your car, but that's not it. This is made out of crude oil. This is all made out of crude oil. There's so many different applications. So the whole world runs on crude oil, not just as a means of providing energy, but as an asset or what you can build things with it. And there's a price for it. It's traded. It's even speculated with. So crypto for me has a lot, I mean, it's not the same, but it's analogous to that. And if you talk to a chemist, that will talk about crude oil in a completely different way than than a car maker or your utility company, right? They have completely different things in mind. And in crypto, it's the same, and that's what we try now and all together to somehow sort out, because it branched out, and you said it, it branched out so quickly. It was not like, yeah, it's taking 10 years and it evolves very slowly. It's just like every half a year you have a new narrative, you have a new idea, because it's that coordination, the ability, not a given, but the ability to have decentral coordination of a lot of people cross border. And this is the new thing. So, and this is difficult to grasp, although it's pretty boring if you boil it down to what it actually is about.
Let me add to what the previous law student was saying. So the use case that I really came across was really cryptocurrency as a method of payment. Because I would like to share two anecdotes. So first of all, in 2017, when I first set up my Gemini wallet, I was supposed to link my DBS account to Silvergate and then to transfer, do a $10 transfer. So I opened a multi-currency account with DBS. I put in like $60 and 60 Singapore dollars, and then I thought $60 would be enough for $10 US to transfer over. So I pressed buttons, and 3 days later, my banker calls me and says, "Sorry, your transaction didn't go through." Then I said, "Why?" He said, "Insufficient funds." I said, "Hey, for 10 US dollars, I have to give you more than 60 Sing dollars."
Too high fees.
Yeah, the bank fees from DBS and the bank fees from Silvergate.
Of course.
So that was crazy, right?
Crazy.
Second anecdote, I was on in 2018, I was on a trip in I went to Monaco, then Tokyo, then Seoul, and then my clients told me last minute to go to London for an event. I had no pounds in my wallet. I only had Sing dollars, and some won and all that. So I took a flight, arrived at Heathrow, went to the TravelX desk, and then I wanted to exchange my cash, right? And then I looked at the rate and I said, something's wrong. Something looks wrong with the rate. So I took out my phone, checked the rate, and the TravelX counter was charging 30%. Okay, that's crazy, right? 30%, yeah. And you know, those of you who are traveling, you know this. And I mean, in Singapore, it's not so crazy. Nobody cuts your throat so much. And then I went to the ATM machine and I looked at the rate, it's the same. So, you know, yeah, it's a total rip-off. And these are the centralized organizations that are controlling your currency exchange. So I just converted my crypto into a local currency, and that was much easier. Right. So this is a very clear initial use case, right? Cryptocurrency being a method of payment. And nowadays, most because we accept like Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT, so most of my clients actually pay me in crypto because it's so much easier, so much less bank fees. Right? There have been reported cases where $100 million worth of crypto was transferred and like 50 cents come. If you do it through the bank, you'll take a 1%, right? At least. Right. So this is a very clear use case. And this also goes to the crux of the discussion topic. Crypto is worthless. Why? Because the regulators want you to think that it's worthless so that they can control currency and money. Right. So the common person is, like my parents, they don't come to me and ask about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. They watch the media. And I say, hey, the media listens to me. Why are you going one round and listening to your friend, the media, instead of listening to me? I'm the expert, right? Yeah. So this is what Christine Lagarde and all the regulators and all the authority figures say. Some of them might not know. Some of them know, but they just say these things so that you common person don't know about it until we are all in it, and then it's too late for you.
Can I ask a question?
Super cheap, super sneaky.
I'm a former Bosch guy who quit, went into management consulting. Has nothing to do with Bitcoin, and I paid more than $70 a month. So what I find really interesting about it is the idea, the ethos, like you say, people who are religious zealots about this, or they're naysayers, and the idea of decentralization is a beautiful thing. As you see this gaining adoption, all of the problems and issues that come with our TradFi, all of those issues that are there because of regulatory things and the concentration of power, I see creeping into this more and more and more. And of course, BlackRock and others are going to talk it down because it's in their interest to get it back down again if they want to invest and drive it back up because they're late. I was really interested to hear your Web3 definition. I haven't thought about that before, but it's whatever you want. I think Web3 was Facebook's rebranding tool. So for me, for those of you who've been in finance and also into crypto for a long time, certainly compared to me, how do you see that developing over time? Will we allow it to perform in the function with which it was intended? Or are all the powers that be going to get their dirty little fingers into it? And the guys who have all the Bitcoin early on going to cash out and just go sit on their yachts, and the world will continue.
So talking about yachts, the last big event that I was in before the reopening, right, was in January 2020. And on that yacht, there were 10 people who bought into Bitcoin at less than 10 cents. Wow. So that was a super yacht. And one of them was Brock Pierce, and we're talking about gaming and weapons and all that. So he made his first or second pot of gold from reselling all these. So you get a whole room full of gamers play and then resell it. And Brock Pierce ran for presidency as well. Most of the crypto whales I know only count their wealth in crypto. They don't talk about the US dollar value. They talk about how many Bitcoin they have, how many Ether they have, and some of them have all their wealth and no bank accounts. Some of them are, of course, banned, so they don't have bank accounts. But whenever they need to pay for something, they just convert a bit of ETH or Bitcoin. They only measure the up and down cycles, not in US dollar, but in crypto. So that's the crypto purist. And I think the march of technology versus regulation is going to come, right? And this is why, I'm still relatively young, so I didn't catch the commercial end of the internet when it first came up. But now that crypto is here, blockchain is here, then we're seeing all these implementations. But in my entire working career and business career, I've never seen any technology that has worried governments so much. Right? Everywhere, basically every large enterprise, I'm sure a lot of you are with enterprises, everyone is examining blockchain and cryptocurrency, everyone. And I've never seen that ever happening in any kind of technology, right? You talk about cloud, which is an enabler. You talk about AI, all these are different phases of technology, but none of them actually worried every government and every large corporation as much as blockchain and crypto. So certainly there has to be something, right? Yeah, and it's always that interplay between technology and innovation versus regulation and centralized control. So now this is coming more and more to the fore.
Good night. So I'm a lawyer, and actually my first job was working for a computer program company called All Speculative. I've been a tech geek for over 30 years. Code in C# as a hobby, pretty geeky on the tech side, and also set up crypto funds, some of which may have gone under, and worked with Metaverse companies. But it's the legal side of things that interests me as to be, because regulation is happening. And so the FATF come out with virtual asset service provider rules. The US are looking into it from various angles, from securities laws, commodities laws, currency laws that are regulated globally. I think that's a good thing. I think there is a lot of activity, particularly in the token space, which should be regulated. It is designed for regulatory arbitrage and needs to be regulated for potential investors. And I think that crypto will be served well by it once there's good regulation, flush out a lot of the dodgy actors and give it credibility rather than destroying it. But what's particularly interesting for me as a lawyer is the concept of smart contracts, which I think is going to actually savage the whole law industry, because you'll be able to have wills, transfer real estate contracts, all on the blockchain. What that will do is permit transactions to be carried out in cryptocurrency for real hard assets linked to the blockchain. And that will legitimate it, and it links to that whole means of payment analysis service. So I think actually law regulation is going to give a lift to crypto, and they will legitimate it as a potential asset class payment. One concern I have is the technology. It relies on various different actors, various different systems, various different bridges, and various different coins, all of which are subject to potential hacking, failure. It could cause the loss between the break between the token and the smart contract that governs the token. I think that the whole infrastructure needs to be fixed in some form to be totally speculative, and this is weirdly conceptual. But quantum computing is on the rise. Will that destroy the consensus model of the whole blockchain, or even the cryptographic nature? It's the really strange terrain with a lot of issues, and I don't think we're right now yet.
Sadly, we are just about to run out of time, but I think it's been a great conversation, and plenty of passion, plenty of views. And I suppose if I am to summarize it, I think, at least in this room, the proposition is crypto worthless, or crypto is worthless, has been defeated, because very clearly there are uses, applications that provide value. You've got value, of course, in the nature of the technology, which is evolving. You've got value in payments, so you can save yourself from being gouged by some terrible fee structures. You've got the value of decentralization, and you've got the potential for regulation to catch up. And clearly, as you say, Malcolm, it's an area of some concern to governments all over the world, and they're looking at it very carefully. So really, really great conversation and discussion. I want to ask you all to join me in thanking Tim, Malcolm, and Rena for their expertise sharing. And I want to thank all of you for taking part and providing us with deeper insights as to the uses of blockchain, the uses and value of crypto. So thank you all very much indeed. As I always do when I have a captive audience, I want to just say that if there's anything we can do to help, drop us a line at here-to-help@sicc.com.sg. And by that I mean, if there are activities, topics, themes that we are not currently providing that you think we should, do let us know. We do not have a monopoly on wisdom or knowledge. And if equally you think we're missing a beat on some of the things we do and we could do better, also drop a line to here-to-help@sicc.com.sg. Better still, those of you who are not members, become a member and drop a line to membership@sicc.com.sg and help us drive this 185-year-old company forward to benefit businesses and Singapore. So on that note, thank you all very much indeed. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.